What are you laughing at?
The essence of the Mound, Omen of Cthulhu as a co-op survival horror game is best captured by a moment where I was yelling at my friend, repeatedly asking what the hell he was laughing about before being brutally murdered. You see, this was not my friend at all, but a faceless one using his character model and repeatedly playing back his recorded laughter from earlier in the match. But when it comes to making me feel like I've lost my mind, the Mound's clever madness effects sometimes take a backseat to ruthless difficulty that doesn't always respect my time or make it easy to bring in new allies.
My sight, losing my mind. Wish somebody would tell me I'm fine.
It took more than 50 expeditions and around 50 hours of scouring the beautiful Chilean wilderness to unbury all the secrets of the Mound's rich mid-1600s setting. You and your friends take on the role of conquistadors, ignoring every possible warning of danger to enrich themselves and the Spanish crown, while avoiding the restless dead and trespassing on strange tombs to alien gods.
You scout ahead.
As far as capturing the vibes of the Cthulhu mythos, developer Ace Team has done a fantastic job. Of course, when I hear Lovecraft and conquistadors in the same sentence, I immediately see the potential for a twisted kind of synergy between them we could maybe call advanced racism. And for the most part, Omen of Cthulhu threads this needle pretty well, as many of the more recent adaptations of Lovecraft's work have also sought to do. The Mapuche, indigenous to this region in real life, are mentioned multiple times in the story and very clearly aren't conflated with the strange cultists of the Elder Gods who live deeper in the jungle. I would have liked to see a bit more of the Mapuche, and there's still the implication that the New World is an untamed wilderness of nightmares and dark magic, which plays into some colonialist tropes, but it's certainly better than the original Lovecraft version of the story. The tale of the Mound and the secrets that lie beneath it are told in effective journal entries with great voice acting too.
A terrible storm, the kind of which I have never witnessed before, not even at Cape Horn, shattered the Commendador upon the shore.
I very much enjoyed discovering what was going on little by little, and the late game reveals are dramatic and satisfying. Across 18 detailed maps that interconnect into a single large world, though you can only access one section at a time, you go forth on contracts that come with a goal, a potential reward, and a set amount of gear based on how many players are coming along, up to a max of 4. I think this way of handling equipment is quite clever. Often there aren't even enough weapons for everyone, for example, so you have to decide who in the party is going to be responsible for combat, who's going to hold the lantern in dark areas, and who might simply leave their inventory slots empty to carry more loot. It also makes you try out different equipment and not fall into the rut of bringing the same gear every time. I ran into an issue with the way contracts work after about 20 hours though, in that the random assortment offered seems to scale with the character level of the server host. That meant that if I wanted to bring a new friend in who hadn't played before, I might be totally out of basic and even medium difficulty contracts to ease them into things. I appreciate that in similar co-op horror games like Phasmophobia, I can farm the newbie missions over and over for resources and pick difficulty settings friendly to the allies I've invited along, especially considering the Mound can be incredibly punishing even on basic expeditions. The group I've been playing with is an experienced co-op crew too, with hundreds of hours together in games like Phasmophobia, Lethal Company, Abiotic Factor, and Valheim. We're no greenhorns, and we all came to the conclusion pretty quickly that, to put it bluntly, the Mound is really freaking hard. Some of this can be mitigated by learning how specific mechanics work. For example, there's a timer on most expeditions that we found doesn't really matter at all, and it's much more important to move quietly so as not to upset the deadlier creatures of the forest than it is to go fast.
Go away, bird. Birds aren't real.
But even when we felt like we were doing everything right, sometimes the number and deadliness of enemies simply scales way too quickly to provide a satisfying challenge without feeling overwhelming. When it's 4 of us against a dozen zombies and there's no room to sneak past or go around, even on the lowest difficulty, what exactly are we supposed to do?
Run.
And that's assuming you even have basic contracts left in the ledger to attempt. The absolute worst for this are portal missions, which leave you without the usual ox cart to carry your stuff, and require you to navigate a modified version of the map covered in purple goo that will kill you instantly if you stand in it for what feels like about 3 seconds. Which then also prevents your friends from getting close enough to revive you. I can't recall ever having a good time on one of these missions, and eventually tried to avoid them whenever possible. We often found ourselves asking after 7 or 8 failed expeditions if this was really the intended experience or if we were missing some key mechanic that would make it feel a bit more fair. And it seems like the answer is the former. The problem is not so much that advanced and legendary contracts are really difficult. They should be. I want to have something to strive for, but more that there aren't enough options to tailor the difficulty to your group or mood. The floor is too high. That said, I should mention there was a fairly big balance patch about a day before this review went live that tweaked the difficulty, among other things, but it arrived so late that I haven't been able to put it through extensive testing yet. It doesn't seem to be wildly different after a couple of expeditions.
Oh shit. I'm having my soul sucked out or something.
There is some meta progression between contracts to ease the pressure, but most character levels simply unlock new knife skins that are purely cosmetic. Buying or upgrading gear ahead of a tough map is a nice option, but since you lose all those extras and upgrades on death or success, it's very easy to fail an advanced or legendary contract a few times, wind up broke, and not really have any way to go scrounge up some quick cash in calmer waters before trying again. It's a shame because when the Mound isn't being overly oppressive, the tense combat and horror elements work really well together. The variety of enemies is impressive, drawing from the deep corners of the Cthulhu mythos, and going all the way from the simplest, creepy, possessed humans up to some very weird reality-bending horrors that might not even be possible to kill, making your party navigate around them in specific and clever ways. Resource management is key, and the variable value of treasure leads to thrilling decisions in cases where you're not sure if you've picked up enough to meet your quota yet, but the jungle is getting angry.
That's good enough.
It's also difficult to recommend the Mound if you want to play solo. It will spawn an NPC companion to help you out somewhat, but they're not as competent as a human ally, and trying to complete contracts on your own can be a serious trial, even though the number of enemies is scaled down a bit. The co-op game is better in co-op isn't exactly a shock, but since they give you the option to fly solo, it's worth noting all the same. If you have a reliable group to play with, the Mound Omen of Cthulhu can be a challenging and entertaining horror excursion.
Oh my god, there's 4 of... No, there's 4 of you. Who's wrong? Who's fake? Who's fake?
Sometimes it feels a bit too oppressive though, and could benefit a lot from more nuanced difficulty options, especially for introducing newer players into a higher level group. Still, clever sanity effects, great enemy variety, and an expanse of eerie, majestic jungle to explore are enough that this one will probably stay in my crew's rotation when we're up for something heart-pounding.
Alright,
Looks like this is your last mission, Padre.
let's get the fuck out of here.
Reviews director Tom Marks here with Len Hafer to talk a little bit more about her taste in this genre, the horror-y, co-op-y stuff. You reviewed stuff like Valheim for us, Sons of the Forest. But give me just sort of like, what are some of your favorites in terms of this sort of emerging-ish genre in the last couple of years of co-op, spooky games with your friends?
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to like place the mound within that space, but I do think like the touch points that are most meaningful are probably like phasmophobia, in the sense that like you're 4 people with some gear and you're dealing with supernatural entities as like your job. Like you have a job and this is what you're doing. And then Sons of the Forest actually, while it's not an open world survival crafting game at all, I think is another good point of reference just because it takes place in a forest. There's spooky, weird cannibals that you sometimes don't really have to fight. It's sometimes better to just like avoid them if you can. Those are definitely the 2 maybe closest points of reference.
I guess this is the way to ask this, is if somebody is already a fan of some game in that world, which fans would you most recommend the Mound to? Are you going to be recommending this to people who are big Left 4 Dead people specifically, big Phasmophobia fans, big Lethal Company fans? Like, what crowd is this aiming for?
Yeah, I think if you like the vibes of Sons of the Forest, you're really going to like this, but gameplay-wise, it's definitely closer to like a Phasmo or a Lethal Company, for sure, than it is to like a Left 4 Dead. Like if you go in guns blazing, that's not gonna go well for you. It's definitely not like a horde shooter. It's a horror game where some of the enemies, you can't even technically kill them. You have to come up with clever ways to sort of circumvent them or just not aggro them at all. And even the basic enemies, like if you can avoid fighting them, it's usually better not to. So that's the kind of game it is sort of more of a sneaky, looty game than a shooty, slashy game.
Let's talk a little bit more about the insanity side of this game, because people still talk about Eternal Darkness, right? People still talk about Metal Gear Solid reading your memory card. These are very clearly mechanics that stick with people and have become touchstones, but also aren't used very often. And then also on top of that, I feel like can risk becoming gimmicks, can risk just sort of feeling hokey rather than being scary. So what's the line you see in those, and how does this game handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it literally does have some that are basically pulled like straight from Eternal Darkness, like where it looks like you have flies on your screen. And those get, after you've seen it a few times, you're like, all right, yeah, I've seen that before. I think when it gets really clever is when it uses like the enemy AI in interesting ways. Yeah, there's this one clip I remember in particular where we're all standing around a wagon and there's supposed to be 4 of us. That's the maximum number of players you can have on a server. And I realized there's 5 people. So obviously one of these is not a real person. So that kind of stuff, I think, is where sort of the sanity mechanics really shine, is when they create doubt and, you're aiming your crossbow at what looks like a disgusting zombie, but in the heat of the moment, you're like, okay, but is that one my friend, or, what's going on here?
It's so funny, this rise of very casual co-op games where you're just sort of hanging out with people and stuff like RV There Yet or Human Fall Flat is also being joined by Be Terrified with Your Friends games. They feel cut from the same cloth, as weird as that might be.
There's some tension there, I think, especially with a game like The Mound, where it's like if you want to progress, you have to actually kind of lock in a little bit. Because it is kind of a funny hangout game, especially in like those first 2 or 3 hours when we were all going, insane in the game and didn't know what was going on at all. And it just kind of feels like inviting your friends to a cool horror party. And then, eventually you have that sort of vibe wears off and you're like, okay, well, we want to actually complete some missions. So we've got to figure out how to keep that from happening again. But, yeah, they are sort of in the same spirit of just like fun hangout games where weird stuff happens and everybody laughs about it.
Well, Len, thank you so much for chatting with us a little bit more about this weird, lovely genre that is becoming more popular. If you want more horror stuff from Len. You reviewed the Dark Pictures Directive 8020, and then more co-op-y stuff, let's say, Windrose before that. And for everything else, stick with IGN.